Good afternoon, and welcome to this week's episode of St. Paul's Souls Talk. Today, Jay and I are going to be discussing a more pressing topic. We often spend times talking about the renewal or meaningful aspects of the church, whether it's from ministry, whether it's prayer, um, whether it's why we're still Catholic. But today I wanted to kind of spend some time talking about how young people view the church. I think we can all acknowledge that one of the hardest parts about what we're facing in church right now is the dearth of young people. What did it look like at St. Francis?
Well, St. Francis was very, how shall I put it, empty,
Yeah.
that wise. I mean, there were a few, don't get me wrong, there were a few, but not a lot. And when I speak of young people, when I say that, I'm talking about basically teenagers or people in their 20s.
Yes.
Kids we did have at one Mass.
I mean, the later Sunday
The 11
one,
o'clock
right?
Mass on Sunday, which, there was a liturgy of the word for children at that Mass. And so that seemed to be the Mass that they were at. Although I'll have to admit, once school was out, that kind of went down too. So, I guess that's a natural. People are going on vacations, people are traveling, people are here and there on weekends. I mean, that's understandable.
Well, yeah, and I think it's ingrained even into us that summertime is the time where a lot of responsibilities we begin to not do as much. I mean,
Right, we relax.
which we need. Truly.
True, in our culture we do. It's not like former cultures where things weren't as crazy busy. I guess the Industrial Revolution changed everything. People were all of a sudden thrown into the machine, if you want to put it that way.
And there's a lot to be said for that, because I think going into that, and Christopher's is the same way, and Paul's is the same way, and those are the churches that I spend a lot of time at. There are some kids, and I'm talking, like you said, maybe below teen, but like maybe 12 and below. But there's not a lot of 20s. And I still think of myself in my 20s, though I am not. But when I see somebody that's my age that isn't Allie or Liz singing with me, I kind of go, oh, what is that person doing here? And I almost have in the back of my mind of, well, why are you here? And isn't that terrible that the initial reaction is not, oh, I'm glad to see you. It's, why are you here?
I understand what Sean is saying. I come from a different perspective. I cannot even imagine 20 anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
To be quite honest, it's a long time ago for me. And, the funny part about it is, and I've been saying Masses all this month, at least one Mass a weekend at St. Christopher's.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've been seeing is more people that age than I'm used to. And I'll be quite honest about that. Oh yeah, this church really has that age group coming. But then there's another aspect of it that I've noted too, as I've looked out at the congregation, and that is a lot of places you might expect more of the females of that age to be present.
Yes.
And what I see at Christopher's is the opposite.
Isn't that interesting? Because even for what we do with Facebook, I am allowed from our side, and I don't know if you know this, they don't collect a ton of information, but one of the things that they do collect is how many people watch the videos, how long they watch it, how much time is spent. And one of the most fascinating things is, take a wild guess what the breakdown is between men and women.
I have no idea.
76% are women who watch, and only 24% men, which we appreciate all you dealing with us on the show. But it's just, it is interesting because Christopher's is kind of an anomaly in that. But going into the topic of where are the young people, everybody seems to ask that without identifying, well, let's ask them. But I think Jay gave a great segue into the spot. The busyness, I think, is one of the first things I wanted to talk about, because yes, there are other parts of this topic, and let's be honest, we could probably spend 8.5 hours on just this topic, and people have written about it. But I think one aspect that does get overlooked sometimes when people say, oh, young people just don't like or dislike or hate church, is the busyness. And I feel, being younger, I feel that we've been given a culture or taught that you have to hustle, that you can't do anything that is just to fulfill yourself spiritually or emotionally. It's, how do I monetize it? How do I monetize every moment of my time? If I'm picking up a skill, I'm not picking up a skill to pick up a skill. I'm learning how to bake so I can sell my cookies. I'm learning how to knit so I can sell a blanket. I'm learning how to do cross stitch so I can put it on a marketplace somewhere. It feels like everything has been turned into such monetization that the idea of just doing something to fulfill a non-monetary need seems useless. Maybe, is that the word?
I'm not so sure the word is useless. I think more often it just doesn't come to mind.
I think that, yeah.
But that's me from an ancient perspective of old age.
But that's why I like this conversation, because in a lot of ways, and one of the reasons why I think this is one of our really important episodes, and we've, like I said, we've spent a long time on kind of more gentle topics or positive topics. This is a true struggle. This is a topic that every church has, to a different level, a struggle with, and we get to see it from both of our different ends. And I know I'm an anomaly for my age in a lot of ways, but we get to talk about it from your end of looking and my end of looking, and maybe somewhere in between. We just need to get a 40s to 50-year-old in here, and maybe we can round out the entire generational perspective.
I do think, though, and while Sean has been zeroing in on church, this is kind of true with all voluntary organizations. No matter what they are, they have trouble recruiting. Okay, you can talk about us recruiting people for the church. It's a different word that we don't actually use, but it's a word that reflects on other voluntary organizations, and they're having the same issues. I mean, their membership is getting older, and they're not attracting the young.
And where is that coming from? And I think that's where I see it as maybe a monetary side, but it's true, because even organizations that were once considered fun, hobbies, gaming groups. Now it's all online. The idea of going out anymore, I think that in some ways has given rise to dating apps. Because how do you meet people? Well, people from the younger generations don't go out like they used to. They're always working, or it keeps coming down to the, well, this is a waste of time because I could be, and I'm guilty of this too. Jay can attest to anytime I try and take a vacation. Well, did you actually take a vacation or did you stop into work? Okay, well, I went into work, but it was only an hour because I just made, it's the idea of sometimes that's a lack of fulfillment because everything has to have an end goal.
Well, again, and I see that with Sean, like he just said. When he says he's going to take a vacation, my response always is, are you going to go out of town? Because if he doesn't go out of town, he doesn't take a vacation.
No, nope.
And that's the truth. And God forbid that he should go out of town.
Mm-hmm.
Because he thinks the whole world is going to collapse if he doesn't.
And even then, if I do, the cell phone, which is terrible in a lot of ways, stays on because, oh, I don't know if someone might need something, or if there's a question, or if someone can make sure that this music is done, or who's going to play this, or God knows if someone's going to actually show up. And that's my greatest fear, is going out and then, because once, and some of you may remember this, it was years and years ago, the pastor went out of town and we were supposed to have a substitute priest who didn't show up. And I ended up running the communion service from the back organ, the choir loft. And I think ever since then I've had this eternal fear that something's going to happen. But I think that talking to a lot of my generation, I think there's a commonality of that worry about stuff, and I don't know how we address that worry.
Well, you know, there's an old bumper sticker that, as Sean leads into that, reminds me of. He who has the most toys at death wins.
Mm-hmm.
And we do kind of have that kind of a society, an acquisitional society. But in another sense, and Sean brought it up a little while ago, is that the fact of socialization. For all the social media, all the social apps, all the stuff, we become less and less social.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is remote. There's no person-to-person contact. And in a lot of ways, this has kind of happened slowly. Even before everyone had these mobile phones and that, it started before that, as there was less intermingling with children.
Mm-hmm.
As we grew up, there were maybe less kids in the neighborhood, kids to associate with. That interaction just didn't happen.
Well, even in my neighborhood, it's interesting because there's a lot of kids in my neighborhood. They don't really play with the other kids, and it's interesting because I don't cast judgment on it at all, but just from a more intellectual perspective, I remember we knew every kid on the block. Whether you liked them or not, you all kind of hung out together. You were always together. whether it was riding bikes, whether it was at, at the neighbor's pool, or you knew everybody. And it's interesting because, and maybe there's something to be said about it, because I remember really in the late 90s, it was, oh, you have to know where your kids are at all hours. You need to know who's going to kidnap your kid, who's going to, and it became less and less, oh, I'm going to the friend's house. Okay, make sure you're home before dark. It was, no, I need to know, I need to know, I need to know. I remember right around that time, and I'm sure some of you can remember this, that was when I was given my first pager, because it was, it was really before cell phones were accessible to everybody. And it was if something happens, you need to know, here's the pager. And if this goes off, you get to a phone as soon as you can, and you call as soon as you can, because it's going to be on the pager. And maybe that is a part of it. Maybe we were more afraid, because I do remember before the pager, it was, oh, I don't care where you are, don't die. I'll see
And
you
I
at
go back
home.
much farther, where it was just, okay, you're gonna be with the kids in the neighborhood, whatever, you gotta play this or that. Make sure you're home in time for dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and after dinner when the street lights go on. Which, for a lot of months of the year, there was nothing after dinner without the street lights
Well,
on.
that's true. That's true.
But during the summer months, we were kind of free, and we enjoyed it. And I remember as a kid, it was something that seemed very, very strange to me. Was my father was not from this area, and his family lived up north in Potsdam, or around Potsdam. And we'd go up there for vacation every year, because that's where all my cousins were. And so I just, and this strange thing was said to me as, as we were walking down the street at night,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever we were doing as kids. And one of my cousins said to me, well, you really should be at home because of the curfew. And I looked at him and I said, what's that?
They had a curfew in Potsdam.
They had a curfew.
That's fascinating.
There was a curfew. It was a college town.
Oh,
And that may have had something to do with it, because there were two large colleges there, Potsdam State and Clarkson. And basically that was the essence of the economy for the towns.
mm-hmm.
Or for the, yeah, Potsdam was a town, but this was the village I was speaking of. But at any rate, and that's one of the things I was amazed. Wow, we have to be in. It's not when the street lights go on or something. Of course, it was after dark. A long time after dark, to be honest.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I think nowadays, just sometimes as an adult, when you see kids alone, it's become such a rarer sight that you kind of go, oh, are they, do their parents know where they are? And that statement comes out, I just think pops out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But that I think plays into what you said about community, because as you grow up, the kids made the community, because all the parents had to know each other, because their kids were all friends. We've lost a lot of the parents knowing each other. I remember, like, many of you know Liz. Liz had bought my old house. And when she did, she actually said, well, what are the neighbors' names? I had lived there for 4 years. I said, he has a dog. That one comes home at 5:30 every day. That's about it. And if you think back 20, 30 years ago, that would never have been the little, all you know about your neighbors. So I think, going on, because I did want to hit a couple of other topics with it,
Yeah.
I think community, or lack of community, is a big reason that young people have a harder time accepting church, because I think a foundational part of church truly is community.
Almost definitely.
And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. As Catholics, one of my friends once joked that Catholics during peacetime mimic the sign of the cross: Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and then cross their arms. But we are a community, whether it's with coffee hours, whether it's with um, getting to talk to people. The community part, it's something that I think people may not even realize they're missing until they have it.
Well, I think that's, you know, that's inherent in the Catholic Church because obviously, especially for those of us who are older, who were born before Vatican II, like myself, and, you know, getting into our teenage years just as the council was happening, and then things were kind of being, you know, looked upon, reflected upon, reorganized, so to speak, structurally, etc. The church was, the Catholic Church was for most people, you know, and I hate to use the analogy, but it's pray, pay, and obey.
Mm.
And that's basically what it was. The coming together of the church as a community was the liturgy of the Mass. And that was basically it. You know, there weren't a lot of, there weren't like potluck dinners like you found at
The
Protestant churches, those type of things. The exception to that I've noted, and didn't at the time, but have since then, was some of the rural Catholic churches, which, you know, had their ham dinners in Varysburg, their chicken barbecues here, their this, that, or the other thing, where they brought the people together because they needed that fundraising support. And it was actually the people of the parish who did the hams and the this and the that, the other thing, and they all came together to do it. And that was a form of community. In the larger parishes like St. Amelia's, where I grew up, you know, the thing that was the lawn fete, where people would get together and work on it, and, you know, it would be a big deal. And there'd be people in charge of this, people in charge of that, people in charge of this, you know, people, there would be volunteers, but then there were, of course, the people who had to arrange for the rides and stuff for the kids. And basically, that was the community. That was community activities of the parish. There were a couple of others that were religiously oriented. And one of the ones that I remember was 40 hours devotion, where there'd be the exposition of the Blessed Sacrament for 40 hours constantly. And there would be procession at the beginning, a procession at the end. We'd bring people together for worship, etc. Another one during Lent was the Stations of the Cross. Well, 40 hours devotion doesn't exist anymore.
Yes.
And, you know, basically, as a matter of fact, all the priests of the diocese just received an email the other day about, you know, we should maybe encourage going back to some of these things. Think about redoing them, especially when we're putting emphasis on the Eucharist. And you know, one of the things that I've always loved was Stations of the Cross. But Stations of the Cross, it was funny. When I was growing up, as a kid, I couldn't go to Stations of the Cross. They'd only let adults in because there was no room in the church.
Isn't that fascinating? And we used to get maybe at Paul's, we used to get, when Jay was there, what would we have gotten? Maybe 20?
At the most.
Yes. It would, which is interesting.
Yeah, it was just such a downer for me because I did go to St. Amuni's school, and because of that adult in the evening stations across in the older grades, we had stations of the cross in the afternoon in school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was in the church, but it was the school, and you know, and that's where my love for it grew out of something, out of prayer that was extra, not just the mass, but that. So there were a lot of those things, but to the mind of most people, the community aspect of the church was Sunday Mass. Sunday Mass. And that was it. And what we've done now is, in losing the other senses of community, we've also lost a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't come across to our young people.
And I think that, so that goes into another aspect is, I think something you hear, and kind of addressing the whole rest of it, and again, this could go 8 hours, and we'll probably come back to this topic at other points. They view the church as not relevant. That's one of the biggest. As much as this word seems so small, this is a word that gets thrown around a lot. Mean.
Okay.
That's a big one. Backwards. And not welcoming. And I think the not welcoming is really what we've been addressing today. And we maybe have to do, it's always uncomfortable to talk to new people. And I think we've been so trained, I think because we all hate salespeople, and no offense to any salesperson out there, it's been ingrained into us that
Yeah.
it's a meme. It's on TV shows. It's a trope. It's a trope that has existed always. The salesperson's coming for you, and don't make eye contact because they're going to high pressure you. Blah 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 blah. And I think that's one of the aspects that scares young people after they get out of the habit of coming back, that people are going to swarm them, that people are going to say, oh, where were you? Or I haven't seen you, or ask questions. And it's interesting because I don't know the right solution to address that. Because on the one hand, and you know this, for as much as I can show it differently in person at church, I'm an immensely shy person. If I were gone for a while, I would want no one to have noticed. I don't want anybody to bring it up. I don't want anybody to make a comment. I would actually live in fear of someone bringing it up to me. At the same time, on the other hand, it would be nice for someone to say, oh, I missed you. It's good to see you again. So and I think a lot of people are in that portion because they don't want to feel like they have to justify, oh, well, I wasn't here because I was on vacation, or I was away, or grandma had this, and I feel like they're so afraid that they're going to be questioned. Or how do we get past and reconcile those two things to know you're wanted?
And I think that's a difficulty for people because, like, Sean, I'm extremely shy, I'm extremely introverted, and it's difficult for me to go out. It's difficult for me to go out because innately I have this fear of rejection. Be that as it may, that's what's there. And somehow, no matter how much I may be told otherwise, it still is in my gut.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, I'm also a very inquisitive person. I seek answers all the time. And therefore, I do question people. Not because I'm blaming, not for anything else. I just want to know. I'm curious. And that's where it comes from. But I see perfectly what Sean is saying, because both ways are saying the same thing in one sense, but in a different way. And one may seem to be, oh, they're at me.
I'm in
And the other
trouble.
way, and the other way is they're interested in me. They're interested in me. Not what I was doing, but they're interested in me as a person.
And that, I think, is one thing that we, and I don't say it is casting blame, because we're all trying to, our goal is the same. Our goal is we want people to feel truly cared about, to know that there's something bigger than themselves. And I think that's one of the struggles that young people have, not having faith. And this is Presbyterians, Lutherans, Anglicans, Catholics, non denominational. I think one of the hardest parts about not having faith is it's ingrained in us to question why. Why did this happen? Why does humanity exist? And without having faith, it makes for a harder existence. It makes for a harder. I truly believe that it makes for a harder existence. Not thinking that there's something bigger, something more important, something beyond anything that we can. I think that adds to a lot of the anxiety. I think it adds to a lot of the questioning, whether it's about your own life, your choices, you're this, you're that. I truly believe that that's a major thing that's missing, and has led to, really, we're seeing, not that there haven't been other hard times in history, but we're seeing a massive influx of people who suffer from depression, who suffer from anxiety. And I think it's because thinking that we're the be all end all is almost too much pressure for a human.
Well, again, and it just popped into my mind as Sean was talking about how the whole concept of, and I may be wrong here, but seems to have grown is this inherent philosophy that we put on our young people is you can be anything that you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it. You. It's always an emphasis on the individual. Always on the individual. And you get encased in this individuality. And, we do need other people.
Well, it's
God knows
also
we need other people.
a lot to live up to. I, because how, if you're told the sky's completely the limit, and I don't mean this to limit people, but you ever have those things where I think everything in life starts out well intentioned and good, and then sometimes too much of anything in excess
Right.
is bad, and that includes even encouragement. And I don't mean that terribly, and I don't mean it derogatorily. I just mean it honestly. And the example I'll use is Liz often keeps me honest as a teacher, because I was told a lot that I couldn't. I was very often told I would not be a professional musician. I was told many times that I could not sing, believe it or not. So I was told I couldn't so often that in my teaching world, I've become almost the opposite, where I've over encouraged. And sometimes it makes people, and students, and even people in my generation, who was the generation of the sky's the limit, you can be anything you want, believe too much that if I don't amount to this high ideal of anything I want, I have failed and I am nothing. And I think that is what Jay said, is such a focus on individualism that we've lost other people, we've lost sight of things bigger than us, the divine, the aspects of the world that we can't as humans explain because we've been told we're so smart we have to. We're so much potential. We should be able to understand everything.
And those are just tendencies and trends that unfortunately have an effect of reaching out and attracting people is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to deny that some efforts have led to basically what people are now calling, because of the sex scandal, grooming.
Mm-hmm.
It was never meant to groom, but it is designed to make people welcome,
Mm-hmm.
to let them see. But again, the balance, because of what's gone on, the publicity that has been out there, makes things very difficult.
It is.
For the people judging it too. Okay, what do they want to take from me?
Mm-hmm.
What do they want to get out of me? You know, as a priest, the only thing I can say is, what do I want from you? What do I want to get out of you? I want your salvation. I want you to know God. I want you to understand how much He loves you. That's what I want.
And that's a beautiful, beautiful thought. We got our signal that it is about time for the broadcast to end, but I actually think that's one of the most beautiful things to end on. We'll address other parts of those topics because we had brought up kind of 4 issues, but we appreciate you being here. On Thursday, we have our praise and worship night after the 5:30 Mass, so 6 with a
Ish.
general-ish, a generous-ish. But we are so happy to keep doing this for you, and we look forward to seeing you next week, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day and a prayerful, wonderful week.
Take care, and God bless you all.